Hello everybody, I'm Motor Quickly Fix It Out, and today I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to be replacing the brakes on my 6th gen Celica, and the process is actually going to be the same for the Camrys that are right around the same year, but this process is actually going to be for disc brakes instead of drum brakes. If you do have drum brakes, it's going to be a different process. If you do have disc brakes, then this is going to be the right video for you. And I've already got the car jacked up. I have a pair of jack stands on the pinch welds that are right over here, and then I have a jack on the center brace just right over there holding up the car. With the car perfectly jacked up, we're going to make sure to give it a little bit of push to make sure this thing won't fall down. So we're going to start by removing the tire. Unfortunately, since these are rear brakes, then you're not going to be able to turn the wheel out, so that way you have a little bit more room. You're going to have to work with what you have. But first, you're going to have to start by removing the brake caliper. This is going to be a 12mm bolt here. And there's the guide pin. Now you're going to notice there's actually not a bolt up here. That's because it's actually hidden behind. In order to get this off, you actually have to swing this up and then pull this back, and that will reveal the guide pin. There's a lot of spider webs back here. You can set this up and out of the way. I would recommend grabbing like a coat hanger or a bungee cord and hanging this somewhere so that way it's not on the brake line. This is just an extra step, but if you wanted to, you could take a 10mm socket and ratchet and remove the top guide pin as well. And then you can also start removing the brake pads. They should just slide out. You're going to see the caliper bracket bolts just right over here and over here. These are two 14mm bolts. These are pretty torqued on there. They're about 80 foot-pounds. So I would recommend that you grab a breaker bar in order to remove these bolts. And then loosen the rest of the way with a regular socket and ratchet. And that's two, and that should be enough to allow you to remove the caliper bracket. And now here's where you grab your favorite hammer and then just bang this thing out. Now it's also a good time to mention, make sure that your emergency brake is off, because if your parking brake is on, then it'll make it hard for this to come off. I actually had this issue when I was doing the other side. I just had one of those moments where I was like, oh duh. So make sure your emergency brake is down, and then you should be able to just slip this off. It should just come right out. If you're able to, now's a good time to also try to get a brake hardware kit. Unfortunately, my local auto parts store did not have some, so I'm gonna have to reuse these ones for now. They should just pull up just like this. And while everything's off, now is actually a good time for you guys to inspect how everything is back here. So as you can see here, there's quite a bit of wear on the parking brakes. So I will have to replace the parking brake shoes at some point, but there's still enough to get me by for a little bit. The sway bar end links right back here, these are very easy to turn. So these may have to be replaced here pretty soon, as well as my boot right up here for my strut is also torn. Nothing's leaking yet, but it's also a good idea to start thinking about it. Luckily, I'm thinking about getting coilovers for this car in order to drop it just a little bit, but I will always keep the original McPherson struts. I will get this probably rebuilt, and so I'll have these just in case anything happens with those coilovers. I actually ended up painting my calipers red in order to match the ones up front. I just used some VHT caliper paint, and that should withstand the heat of the brake in order to have the paint last for a while. But our next step is actually to go in here and compress the piston that's right over here. And to do that, we're going to use a special tool. And this is the special tool that we're going to use. If you can get a brake pad here, that would actually make things a little bit easier. It'll actually press down a little bit more evenly. But since I don't have a brake pad that small, you could use like a piece of wood that you can find lying around, or you can even grab a brake pad, and if you have a C-clamp, you can actually use that and just compress it this way. But since we don't have any of that nearby, what we're going to do is we're just going to evenly go from one side to the other, move back, go over here, and then go until you can't anymore. and then you could just remove this tool. Inspect it, make sure that it's flush. It just needs to have enough room in order to put the new brake pads on there. From the factory, these are coated with an anti-rust agent. That's actually not good for your brake pads. So what we want to do is we want to grab some brake clean, spray it down, and then wipe off all of that stuff. Make sure to do the same for the backside. And now this is ready to go on. And before changing out my gloves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some anti-seize. I'm actually going to be using a copper-based anti-seize, and I'm going to be putting in just a little dab around here. And then with my finger, I'm just going to apply a very thin layer across all of back here, so that way the new rotor will not stick to it. Be sure not to get this on the rotor itself in terms of like where the brake pads meet. Make sure to avoid that at all costs. But over here, this tiny step, if you wanted to do it, it would save you so much hassle in the future when it's time to take off these brake rotors. These don't tend to wear down as fast as the front brakes and rotors, so they tend to stay on here longer. Chances are they might get stuck because of just time. So this is just a nice extra step to take in order to prevent it from being more difficult the next time you service this car. Now we can place our new brake rotor on. Give it one more spray down for good measure. I took this little rubber piece off of the old brake rotor, so I'll just be reusing it. Just gotta pop it back in. It's just this little rubber piece, just like that. It's time to install the caliper bracket. Put it in place. Add some medium strength thread locker to these bolts and thread them in as far as I can by hand. And torque these down to 79 pound-feet. Next, we can mount the brake hardware. This just slips on, and then make sure this little tab that sticks out just goes over the edge just right there. And here's another anti-seize point. Just put some right here where the brake pads touch. Make sure they do not hit the rotors, and make sure to put some on the other side as well. Make sure you put the top on as well. Next, we grab some more anti-seize and place it just right back here on the backing plate and spread it evenly. Do the same thing for the other side. Make sure nothing gets on the brake material itself. We could place the brake pad on. I'm just going to clean off my guide pin here. Now you can grease this. I've always actually preferred to put silicone paste on it, and then we just put a little dab of silicone paste just right on the guide pin. Start with putting in just the top guide pin for now. I'm just going to make sure this is nice and good and tight. If you want the torque spec, it is going to be 26 pound-feet, and then we could just slip the rubber boot over the guide pin and then get it to go down just like that. Put the next guide pin in. Just tighten that until it's just decently tight, or 26 pound-feet as well. Now we can get our tire back on. And look how great that looks. It's just something small and easy like that just can put a smile on somebody's face. And now we can slowly lower the car and then torque these down to 76 pound-feet. And then head to the inside of the car, pump the brakes a few times in order for the brakes to grab, and then go for a test drive. You'll want to go and do a stop test at 5 miles per hour, 10 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour, and then just work your way up and just make sure that your brakes are working the way that they should. If you liked the video or found it useful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and help share these videos in order to help my channel grow. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching.